Gandhi has a whole altogether different way of looking at the point of politics. You're not bringing new information to people. You are getting them to act on what they already know is wrong. Well, what does that mean concretely? Everybody in this room has had an experience, or has had the experience. You get up each morning, you start going about your business, and before you know it, you're thinking, that's wrong. That's just not right. That's unfair. That shouldn't be. And you pass the day rendering 101 moral judgments against all of the unfairnesses of life. But if you're like myself, you don't really act on any of them. Maybe one or two, but you don't really act. And Gandhi says the idea of politics is to stimulate you into action on what you already know is wrong. So to take an example from my own life, in the winter, I'm jogging down the boulevard where I live, and there's an overpass, and sleeping beneath the overpass in the most frigid temperatures in the winter are always the Mexican workers who have no home to go to. And they're bundled under these raggedy, dirty blankets. And every time I pass them, I make the same resolution. I've made it for years. I say, I'm going to bring them my winter coats. Because I have a closet full of winter coats, maybe 10. They go back to when I was 16 years old in high school and bought a very good Mighty Mac, which is still a very good coat. And I think, I'm going to bring it. I'm going to bring it. Truth be told, I never do. I never act on something I know is wrong. I never move to the point of action. But I know that if there were a group of satyagrahis, Mr. Gandhi's nonviolent resistors, and they were to go into the street, they were to nonviolently engage in civil disobedience, prevent traffic, and hold up a sign. There are people freezing in the streets. Give them your winter coat. I know for certain I would be the first one out there carrying 5 winter coats to the people under the overpass sleeping there. I know that. But I need the stimulation of some nonviolent civil disobedience to get me to act. And that's for Gandhi the challenge of politics. The purpose of the nonviolent civil disobedience, as he said, was to quicken the dead conscience of public opinion into life, to stimulate you to act on what your conscience tells you. But there is one crucial hitch or caveat, the fancier word. And the crucial hitch or caveat is this: no matter how ennobling your methods might be, no matter how morally unimpeachable they might be, if the goal that you set, your ends, don't resonate with the public, your means, even if morally unimpeachable, they will not move the public. Now that sounds a little bit abstract, so let's make it concrete. We take the case, for example, of abortion in the United States. According to all public opinion polls, Americans are divided pretty much 50-50 on the question of abortion. one half describe themselves as pro-choice, one half describe themselves as pro-life. So as a mind experiment, just imagine if all the pro-life people were to descend on all the abortion clinics in the United States and say in unison, we're going on a fast unto the death until this clinic or these clinics stop performing abortions. Now, the method, the means, couldn't be more moral or ennobling. They're not imposing force on anyone. They're not using any coercion. They're simply saying we'll sacrifice our being for our belief. Now, anyone here would be willing to just identify himself as pro-choice? Raise your hand. Okay. If I raise your hand again, just okay. So if I were to ask this woman here, if you don't mind, would you be moved by that spectacle to support pro-life? No. No pro-choice person would be moved. What they would probably say is, I hope you do fast to the death because you should drop dead. What's the point? The point is, however moral your means is, you cannot achieve your goal if you don't have a public that's ready to agree with your goal. Otherwise, you're not going to reach people. To take the simple example from the one I just mentioned, if the people went out into the street and they engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience, and they said, give your winter coat, you have me, and you probably have the broad public. But if they said, give a room in your apartment, you lose me, and you lose, I think, the broad public. Now bear in mind, there's a very good moral case for saying I should give a room in my apartment. And believe me when I say I often am torn inside between knowing it's the moral thing to do, but also I'm not willing to do it. And so it's not in politics, just as it's not about personal opinion, it's not about personal morality either. Because if you set a goal that overreaches the public, you lose the public, however moral it is. I think when people look back at our wealth and see the homelessness, morally, I'm going to lose. That's who we are. And the object now is to set a goal that doesn't necessarily jive with our personal opinion and doesn't even necessarily jive with what morality says is right. It's the goal which is the maximum that the public is willing to absorb, accept, and act on. That has to be the goal. If you don't use that standard, you end up, instead of building a movement, you end up creating a cult. And the two are very different. And Gandhi's life illustrates the distinction between the two. Most of you know Ghandi as